Hi, everyone. Welcome to another workshop from the Writing Support Center. My name is Giselle, and today's workshop is titled Let's Clean It Up, How to Revise Your Essay. Before we begin the workshop, I do want to give you some recommendations so that you can get the most out of this workshop. My first recommendation is that you download the processing worksheet and the revision checklist. Wherever you access this workshop, whether it be on a Canvas shell of your instructors or through the Writing Support Center's Canvas shell, there should be links to two different processing worksheets. Please download the version that works best for you. So if you prefer a Word document, please download that version. If you prefer a PDF, please download that version. It doesn't matter. They are the same thing. It's just a matter of your preference. The other thing you need to download is the revision checklist, which we will be using later on in this workshop. That one only comes in PDF, but please make sure you do download that as well because we will be using it. Another recommendation I have is to take your time. One positive about a recorded workshop is that you can pause and rewind as you need to. So if there's a point you need a little bit more time to process, please make sure you rewind and pause and think about that point before moving on. So, a few goals for today's workshop. The first is to understand the differences between revision and editing. Revision and editing are two things that are commonly mistaken for one another, but they are very different, and we will talk about what those differences are. Another goal is for you to learn revision strategies that will help make the process easier. We hear a lot about revision, but sometimes actually doing revision is the difficult part. So, this workshop is going to walk you through a process that will simplify revision for you. Lastly, you are going to practice revising one of your essays that you are currently working on or that you have already completed. If you are working on an essay, this workshop is great, especially if you're at the point where you're going to turn in your final draft or even a rough draft. On the other hand, if you already completed an essay and you're not working on one currently, if your instructor offers opportunities for revision, this workshop will also work for that type of essay. If you don't have an essay that you're currently working on or one that you recently did, I would recommend maybe doing a different workshop because this workshop is created for someone who is working on revision. You can always revise an essay that you did in the past, but to get the most, using one that you can turn in again is the best course of action for this workshop. So, as mentioned, we're going to talk about the differences between revision and editing to start. I'm going to start with the editing side of this Venn diagram. One thing about editing is that it makes your essay look better. That would mean that editing comes towards the very end of your essay. So after you've revised the essay, then you will begin editing. In the editing stage, what you're doing is you're looking at surface level issues. You're not looking at deeper level issues, which I will talk about on the revising side. But for editing, you're looking at changing letters from capital to lowercase. You're asking yourself, are you capitalizing proper nouns, right? You're looking for misspelled words and correcting those. You're adding, deleting, or changing punctuation based on peer feedback or your professor. You're also indenting paragraphs. One big thing about MLA format is each paragraph is indented um, at the beginning. So if you haven't done that, that's what you would do at the end. As you can see, these are all surface level things. They're all things that make your essay visually more appealing. On the other side, revision is what you do to make your essay sound better. Revision is what you do to improve your argument, to improve the flow of your paragraphs, and to improve the overall uh, um, organization of your essay. So when you revise, what you're doing is you're adding, changing, or deleting parts of the piece to help your writing flow better. You're turning worn out words into vivid words. So this is when a thesaurus comes in handy so that you can change out words for words that get your point across better. You're coming up with an interesting lead that hooks a reader and a conclusion that sums things up. So you're looking at both your introduction and conclusion to make sure they're effective. You're adding specific descriptions, explanations, and details. So if you've ever gotten an essay back and your instructor writes in the margin why or how or explain more, that's what you're doing during revision is you're expanding on things that you might have missed in your first version of the essay. You're also organizing ideas in an order that makes sense to you and the reader. So, as you can see, revision is a lot more time intensive when you do go to revise, and it looks at deeper level issues with your paper, issues that focus on content rather than grammar. So, again, revision comes before editing. Editing is the last thing that you should do when working on an essay. Both revision and editing help the reader read your essay more smoothly, and both revision and editing improve the quality of the writing. For this workshop, we will be focusing on revision over editing. So, here are some simple strategies to help you start revising your essay. The first thing that you can do is just to read it out loud to yourself or someone else. Often we don't realize how many uh, writing errors we can catch just by simply reading out loud our work to ourselves. When you read your work out loud to yourself, you can hear certain things that you might not have caught by just reading it in your head. Another benefit of reading it to someone else is that they might be able to catch something that you are unaware of. Perhaps they have, a different knowledge of writing, and drawing on that knowledge is a helpful way for you to catch mistakes in your writing. Another thing you can do is have someone else read parts of it to get different perspectives. So instead of reading it out loud to someone, letting someone read your essay allows them to visually see something that you might not have caught. When we read our own writing, we tend to skip over things that our brain just fills in. So that's why it's easy to have grammar mistakes or have spelling errors or have lapses in our arguments because our brain is filling in stuff that we know. Uh, However, if you have someone else read it, they don't have the same perspective as you do. So they're more likely to catch something that doesn't quite make sense. So if you have an argument, for example, and it makes complete sense to you, it might not make complete sense to an outsider. So that's why letting someone else read your work will help you get more perspectives and help you improve your essay. People that you can have read your work are friends, your family members, or even a tutor through the Writing Support Center. Another thing you can do is to look at it from the reader's perspective. Do your points make sense? Again, points might make sense to you, but is someone else who doesn't have the same knowledge and background as you, are they going to be able to understand what you're writing? Thinking of your writing that way is another helpful tool for revision. And lastly, use the checklist that will be provided during this workshop. You will be able to use that checklist for the activity we're doing in this workshop, but after this workshop, you can save that checklist and use it for future essays. A reminder, revision takes time. Revision isn't something that we do in just one reading or right after we finish an essay. You have to do multiple readings for an essay when revising an essay, and each reading has a different purpose as to why you're doing it. I've broken it up into 4 different readings so that you can think of different topics during each reading. For the first reading, you're simply looking at organization. So what that means is that you're just making sure the flow of your ideas makes sense. You can ask yourself, do I start with a clear argument? Do I then move into clear points that support my argument? Do I then end in a conclusion that highlights my main points and leave something for the reader to think about after they've completed my essay? Asking yourself if it's organized well is what you're doing in your first reading revision of your essay. During your second reading, that is when you're going to look specifically at content. I would say that your second reading is going to be your most important reading because a strong essay will have strong content. You can have perfect grammar, perfect citations, but if you don't have strong content or if you do not respond to the prompt that your professor provided, then chances are that your essay isn't going to be as effective as it could be. So, when looking at content, what you're looking at is your thesis statement. Does your thesis statement answer the prompt? Are you making a clear argument with your thesis statement? For body paragraphs, you're looking at topic sentences. Do your topic sentences connect with your thesis statement? Do these topic sentences announce to the reader what you're talking about in the body paragraph? Is there a clear flow between each body paragraph? Um, all of these questions are what you're asking yourself as you're looking at content. During your third reading, you're then looking at citations. This depends on whether you have to do MLA or APA. Keep in mind that both of these citation formats are very different. Um, but when you look at citations, you're looking at in-text citations. So are you citing the author appropriately in your actual essay? Are you attributing quotes to the author? Um, do you have a works cited page for MLA? These are all things you're looking at when you're doing a reading for citations. In your fourth reading, that is finally when you're looking at grammar. Grammar includes everything from comma usage to making sure you have periods and capital letters to making sure your sentence construction makes sense, making sure that you don't have run on sentences or fragments. All of these things are what you're doing at the end of revision. There's no reason to do grammar before then or to check your grammar before then, because if you're updating your content or your citations, chances are you're going to be changing sentences. And if you change a sentence, um, it's best to just do grammar at the end when you have all your changes made to your content. Keep in mind that revision is an essential part of the writing process. Uh, Many people will write something and they'll think it's done once it's written. I personally did that in college sometimes where I would not revise my writing. And I realized quickly that revision is important. So after you've written, it is really important that you go back and read through your essay multiple times to find different issues that you can correct and make your essay stronger. So, this is a revision checklist for content. This is a checklist I asked you all to download at the beginning of this workshop. I'm not going to go through each topic on this or each checkbox on this checklist, but I will give you a brief overview of each section. This checklist was adapted from the Ashford University Writing Center, and it's made up of 5 different categories. The first is main components. So these components are the main parts of your essay. Your prompt. Are you responding to the prompt first and foremost? That's the first question. It asks you to look at your introduction, your thesis statement, topic sentences, body paragraphs. Those are all the main parts of your essay. You can use this checklist chronologically. So, what that means is you just start from the top to where it says prompt and then move through it as it's formatted the way your essay would be formatted. So, you start off with, like I said, the introduction and then move on to your body paragraphs and your conclusion paragraph. So, when you use this checklist, make sure you're starting here. As for citations, like I said, that's this second part of the revision process, right? It is your third reading. You then would look at your quotations and paraphrasing and summarizing. Um, you're also going to look at voice and style, followed by your format, and then lastly, proofreading. As you can see, spelling and grammatical errors are the last and only thing. Only one checkbox is for spelling and grammatical errors. So this underlines how important your content is over spelling and grammar. So always focus on content while revising. Uh, to use this checklist, all you need to do is uh, like I said, go through it chronologically, read each statement. So, did you follow all of the incitement instructions? What you would do is pull up the prompt, make sure you're hitting all the points asked in that prompt, and then you would check mark to make sure that you are following the assignment instructions. After that, you would move on to the second one. Do your opening sentences draw your reader in? So, this refers to the opening sentences in your introduction. Once you confirm they draw your reader in, you would check it off. If your opening sentences don't draw your reader in, then you should pause and revise that section before checking it off. After that, you would just, like I said, go through the list chronologically and check off uh, everything that you do have. If you are missing parts, so say your introduction doesn't define your topic, then that would be a sign that you need to revise your introduction to do that. So hopefully you find this revision checklist helpful as you go through your essay. So this brings me to our revision activity. This activity is on your worksheet, but like I said, you do need one of your essays to do this activity. Using the revision checklist, revise one of your essays. This essay can be one that you are currently working on or a past essay that has already been completed. You can revise a portion of your essay or the entire essay. It is up to you. The revision checklist does allow you to revise your entire essay. So if you'd like to do that, I highly recommend that you do. My recommendation would be to revise at least one paragraph of your essay. Once finished, copy and paste one paragraph to the worksheet with your original version and the revised version. So take a few moments, pause here, and continue once you're done doing that revision. All right, I hope you had enough time to revise. If not, please continue pausing. Now that you've revised, I do want you to reflect on your revision. Reflection is a very powerful tool because it allows us to think about why we are doing certain actions, um, and it allows us to um, improve on that process later on by thinking about why we did those actions. So now that you've revised your essay, please reflect on the revision process by answering the following questions. What changes did you make to your essay and why? Do you feel your revisions made your argument clearer and more effective? Why or why not? And did the revision checklist help you while making revisions? If so, how? Go ahead and answer these questions on your worksheet, and once you're done, please continue the workshop. All right, I hope you had enough time to revise. If not, please continue pausing. That's it for this workshop. I do want to point you to some other resources just in case you need them. One great resource is the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I will be posting the links in the transcript so you'll be able to easily click on them. This resource is great because it provides several tips for writing questions. There's handouts on introductions, on transitions, on conclusions, on body paragraphs, so many different topics that you might need help with while you're revising. So if there are any topics you do have a question on, I highly recommend that you go to this website and check if they do have a handout on the topic you need help on. Another resource is the Writing Support Center tutors, DLAs, handouts, and more workshops. All of these resources are accessible on our Canvas shell, which I will be linking in the transcript. Tutors help with any stage of the writing process. So if you are just brainstorming or if you need help with moving past your first paragraph, if you just need help revising, our tutors will help with that. I do recommend that you do review your own essay first before coming in, and come in with specific review questions such as, are my topic sentences matching my thesis? Do I have subject verb agreement? Again, you can come in at any stage of the writing process, but if you need help with revision specifically, it will be helpful to lead the session based on specific questions that you have. Another thing that you can use are online grammar checkers. These are a few of them, including Grammarly, Reverso, and Grammar Check. Keep in mind that these grammar checkers are not perfect, so make sure the grammar changes don't affect the context or meaning of your paper. Uh, you want to make sure that any changes you make with a checker, such as one of these grammar checkers or even spell check on Word, you want to make sure that those changes make sense because, again, these are automated through these checkers, and they aren't as good as you catching your own mistakes because it's it's it it's not a perfect system. So it's best that you make sure that the changes make sense before approving them. That is it for this workshop. If you have any other revision questions or writing questions, again, I highly recommend that you come to tutoring with one of the Writing Support Center tutors. I hope you found this workshop useful and best of luck on your revision process. Thank you.